Okay, thank you for being with us on our webinar today. My name is Angela Brooks. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on your time zone. I'm the manager of global marketing at DISYS, and I'd like to welcome everybody to our topic today, which is enterprise mobile deployment, the good, the bad, and the not so ugly. Thank you so much for joining us today and taking time out to listen to this hot topic. We have some great presenters with us today. To jumpstart our conversation, we asked you a couple of questions when you registered for the event today. You may remember that our first question was, what is your top enterprise mobile deployment challenge? And as you can see, the top responses were setting goals and defining a plan at 29%, and adding bring your own devices to the corporate environment at 26%. We're going to cover these topics today to help you move your mobile initiative forward. Moving on to our second question, we asked you, how ready is your organization for enterprise mobile deployment? As you can see, only 10% of you are not ready, meaning no goals or no plan in place, so congratulations for that. And an impressive 42% are sort of ready, with devices procured. So Brian and Amber's discussion today should make the next steps in your implementation a bit easier. I'd like to formally introduce Amber Abbas and Brian Kemp, our leaders today. Amber is DISYS' Vice President of Global Services. He's leading the charge at DISYS to implement our portfolio suite of managed services across the globe, including mobile solution services and cloud enablement services. Amber is a published author of the book Grid Computing, A Practical Guide to Technology and Applications. Brian Kemp is part of our DISYS Fellows program. He works with us on critical customer projects, one that he just finished up with us in April, and shares his thought leadership with DISYS and our customers through mobility projects as well as webinars such as this one today. He has more than 13 years of IT experience and has worked as a mobile strategist and consultant for Fortune 50 companies as well as small and mid-sized firms. Brian and Amber, thanks again for being with us today. Brian, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, hi. Thank you, first of all, for the opportunity to speak today. And thank you, listeners, viewers, that I'm honored to be here. And looking forward to sharing some information with you today.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Amber, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, Angela. So thank you, everybody, for attending. We look forward to a great webinar. Please keep the questions coming as well.
Thank you, Amber. You were reading my mind. Before I turn over the webinar to Brian and Amber, I do want to let you know that you can ask questions via the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. So please feel free to plug your questions in there throughout the webinar, and we will answer questions at the end of the webinar. Also, I do want to let everybody know that we are recording today's webinar, and we'll send you a link to the recording within 24 hours following the webinar. So again, everyone, thanks for being with us today. And without further ado, Brian, can you take it away for us, please? And I will change the screen to you.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, so
thank you.
I wanted to get started and lay sort of a base amount of education. Just to make sure that we know what we're talking about. I think there's the potential in talking about mobile deployment for there to be some sense of confusion as to exactly what that means. And then in a minute we'll talk about bring your own devices, which also is sort of a nebulous term. And so I want to try to help define the different aspects of those. So when I think of enterprise mobile deployment, I think of it sort of as it falls into three buckets. So the first one being, an enterprise-issued device with access to enterprise services, the corporate phone or a corporate tablet device. And then the sort of second aspect would be, an employee-owned device that does have access to publicly available enterprise services. So maybe Outlook on the web or an Android device that uses touchdown to connect to the Exchange server. And then there really is another aspect that's the employee-owned devices with no specific access to the enterprise services. I spent some time working for Walmart at their headquarters in Bentonville, Arkansas, and they actually implement sort of the third model, and so their employees, have access on their own devices to the internet and to the various communication channels and things of that nature through a separate network than the corporate wireless network there, and that seems to work for them fairly well. Because it allows them to containerize the information in their sorry, they get to containerize the flow of information between the corporate systems and the private systems. So moving on, a couple things that I want to talk about specifically in the bring your own device is that when you're formulating that policy, you should focus on the most common platforms and then where the markets are trending, and aim for the largest segments, right? The largest bang for the buck in that category. Spend your dollars wisely, and then consider that you may have separate policies for corporate supplied devices versus an employee-owned device. So the chart here is from the end of April, and basically it shows a distribution by OS type for phones, and so you can kind of see the trends. So currently Android has a almost 51% market share of total OS installations. Apple's at 32% roughly. BlackBerry or RIM is at 12 and is declining, and Microsoft is at about 4% and slightly declining, and then Symbian is beginning to decline, and I expect that it will decline more rapidly now that support for it has waned. So just wanted to bring those to light. So roughly if you focus on Android and iOS, you would get roughly 82% of the current devices, and I don't believe that there's any contenders that are going to start pushing that out of the way. Microsoft has Windows 8, and there will be a Windows Phone 8 that may have impact, but that's somewhat in the future, and so it's hard to predict today what that looks like. Moving on, there are roughly 4 phases to the life cycle for a device, and so the first step is provisioning, which is taking kind of a blank device or a customer or an employee-owned device and installing the enterprise profile and then the management software. Once those 2 pieces are in place, they sort of bootstrap the ability to apply a configuration or settings and policies. And then may also include the deployment of enterprise apps or corporate data to the device. So usage is normal usage, although I've seen a very interesting use case. There's a large Fortune 50 company that when they have their board meeting, they literally hand an iPad to the board members as they walk in. And on the iPad is all of the reports and all of the numbers that they'll be reviewing as part of that meeting. They don't have any ability to get the data off of those devices, and so the data is fairly secure. And then at the end of the process, they use their MDM as a means to wipe all of the data back off of those devices. So it's a very, very well secured piece. And then retirement of the device could mean a couple of things. It could be, that the device is a couple of years old and, it's time to provide your workforce with a new device. It could be a device that's lost or stolen, or it could be that the company has left, or the employee has left the company, and it's appropriate to remove all of the corporate data from their employee-owned device. So there's a couple of different ways that the retirement may happen. So when you look at what do we need to do to have an enterprise mobile deployment, it really breaks down into 4 steps. So the first step needs determination. Steps 2 and 3, so the device selection or the mobile device management selection, they may sort of reverse roles depending on your specific needs after the needs determination. Like you may have to go find a specific mobile device management solution, and then that may drive the decision for what devices you're going to support. Either way, you'll complete those 2 steps and then move on to the implementation piece. So I wanted to mention mobile operating systems as part of this. It really throws into device selection, but it also plays a part in the MDM selection. So BlackBerry, while technically not specifically an MDM, but with their back end and the BIS servers, they have really sort of supported a lot of this infrastructure for a long time. I do mention that you know, the market share for BlackBerry devices is waning. You know, if they do turn around that process, I would expect that they may, you know, that they already have strength and numbers in this space, and so I would expect them to grow back fairly quickly. Windows Mobile 6.5 also had very good support for installing corporate applications and configuration options. Windows Phone 7 was specifically not developed for corporate use. It was devised for the consumer space, and as such, it's very limited in the capabilities that you can push down to the device. You're limited to a subset of the Exchange ActiveSync protocols. So iOS is probably the most robust and well supported. Starting with iOS version 4, Apple included a set of APIs that these vendors have been able to use and write against, so that you know, they could go implement MDM across the board, and so that has worked very well. Android device support is a bit lagging, but it's expected to mature in the next 12 months. So a couple reasons why Android fits into this category. So number one, the mail integration Touchdown is a third-party application that gets used quite a bit by to connect to an Exchange server, and so that's sort of a gating factor. It's not really at the operating system level yet. And then the other piece is that there are multiple companies, multiple camps who are building APIs for doing MDM and device hardening pieces. Like you may have seen, Samsung bought up a company and their product that's called Safe. Samsung approved. Anyway, so there's that one. Motorola bought a company called 3LM, who also makes a complete set of APIs for managing devices and for the sort of capabilities that MDMs have. And so from discussions I've had with some of the MDMs, that's actually the process for Android that they're going through, is that as those APIs produced by like Samsung or the 3LM companies are made publicly available, then they go and modify their products to be able to support those things and to sort of extract away who the underlying vendor is. So you configure it in their tool, and then they figure out how you're supposed to configure it on the actual device itself. Okay. So this is a chart from Gartner from last year that basically described the 10 most critical needs in a mobile device management system. I won't go through the entire set of information here, but I will go through a couple of them that I think are pretty pretty interesting to consider. So device diversity is important if you are going to have, you know, a multiple devices, or if you're going to have, you know, a fairly open BYOD policy, so that you can make sure that those devices are all covered. Policy enforcement is also big, because, you know, you need to be able to control, you know, passwords and things of that nature, and you also want to prevent devices that have been jailbroken or rooted for getting on to your corporate services. Containerization is really important. I mentioned it a couple of times through this process, and it's really, you know, building walls around your particular data and keeping it from commingling with, you know, the end user's personal data. And then the delivery model is another piece to really consider in this. And the reason that I highlight these items is that for the top tier MDM vendors, they're very similar in their offerings, but these are some of the things that I noticed going through that really had some differentiation from vendor to vendor. And so delivery model is an important thing to consider. Some of the vendors are very much cloud-based. Some of them support multiple models, like they'll be cloud-based. You can either download their process in a virtual machine, or they will actually build and ship you an actual appliance that would go into your data center. And so that's sort of the consideration. There is, for most of the major MDMs, they can do their work over the air, even remotely. There is a solution that Apple started providing in March of this year. It's called Apple Configurator, which actually will let you go do almost all of these policies and procedures, but I don't believe it was designed for large corporate or even mid-sized corporate customers because it requires a physical connection to the device to install the policy and to make changes. So literally you have to you know, sync the device to one particular Macintosh to be able to get the policy over there. So Gartner, in fact, last week made an announcement of their Magic Quadrants related to the MDM space. So the leaders in that space are Mobile Iron, AirWatch, FiberLink, which you'll also see referred to as, I guess it's MAAS 360, it's MAAS 360, Zenprise, and Good Technology. The challengers were SAP and Symantec, and then in the visionary category was IBM and Boxstone. So, you know, if you already are running SAP, or you have, you know, a pretty good coverage with like a Symantec security product, then that may be a good reason to go with them because of the integration piece. For the sake of time today, I didn't cover the challengers or visionaries, but I did go through the leaders and try to figure out ways that they're different and to give an overall feel for them. So AirWatch seemed to be the most complete offering across the board. They had, you know, all three deployment models, as I mentioned, cloud, appliance, as well as the virtual machine piece. They support basically every device that's out there. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily the full capabilities, but it does mean that they have at least some presence for Windows Mobile, Windows Phone 7, Android, BlackBerry, Symbian. So they cover, you know, the vast majority of devices. Mobile Iron also is, you know, one of the leaders. I thought it was interesting, and I brought this up a couple times. They have no means for containerization of corporate or personal data, and so once the corporate data has hit the device, there's no real way to just clean that up as opposed to doing that. And so your corporate data could leak out, as well as your employees' personal data could sort of leak into your system. There's not a good way there to separate them. So the MOS 360 tool that I mentioned earlier, it's a cloud-only solution, and so depending on your tolerance for storing all of your information and those pieces in the cloud, they have a good solution, and then they also support Windows and Mac laptops in a similar way. So configuring data on those devices, if that's a feature that you're looking for, they may be a good solution. Zenprise, they seem very much focused. They have the full set of features, but they seem to be very focused on the network connectivity aspects of the mobile device. So they actually will offer a private web gateway, and then they will also integrate with some of the network access controls like the Cisco ICE system. So very much controlling what devices are on your network at any moment. And then Good Technologies has been around for a while. I've worked in for 2 large companies that provided good services as part of deployment of phones. But it's a container-based system, so everything runs inside of the Good Technologies app, and so your access to email is through this particular app, and so it doesn't use the native mail app for that. Access to other services on through the enterprise are also basically through this this app, and so it's nice and neat, and it doesn't require a whole lot of changes to the end user's device, and it's also very easy to clean up at the end. So let me kind of walk through the steps again. Oh, I guess we're on the implementation piece. So policy development is an important part of this, and so basically it's translation of the existing policies that you have, or making modifications to them. So if your policy is that you change passwords every 30 days and you can't reuse the same one within 9 times or whatever, taking that policy out and then translating it into the particular language that works with the MDM is a piece of that. Determining enterprise licenses. So as I mentioned, Apple has a volume purchase program that you may go through to buy 1,000 copies or 2,000 copies of a particular app at a lower rate, and then they help manage the licensing of that software. And then you may need to set up an enterprise app store. So basically what this becomes is there are apps that are not available through iTunes or Google Play, but when you're a member of this particular organization, there are another set of apps that you have access to through a catalog for installation. And then integration into the existing infrastructure, so making sure that that LDAP is available from the wireless connection, or setting up new Wi-Fi network as needed to support that. And then the actual process of the acquisition and provisioning of the device. Do you want the capability for your remote workers to go pick up, let's say if your device choice was an iPhone, to be able to go to the Apple Store or a retailer and pick up the iPhone and be able to configure it themselves, or do you want to actually bring them all in-house and go through the provisioning through your IT department in a little more hands-on method. So that basically takes me through my section of the content. Hopefully this was helpful information, and so I'm going to turn the rest of the presentation over to Amr. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, Brian sort of went through in a fair amount of detail on how you would sort of set out your strategy and in implementing mobile devices in your environment. What I wanted to touch on was actually a little bit more detail on sort of how those implementations flow. So as a services company, I think one of the most important thing for us to do is sort of really eat our own dog food. So if we're going to go and market our services to our customers, we should really actually be, we should have actually have done a similar implementation ourselves as well. So what I thought I'd cover today with you guys is some of the lessons that we had learned and the process that we went through in actually doing an implementation within our environment. Middle of last year, as we sort of looked at some of the trends that were happening within the mobile environment, specifically around sort of enabling your employees with access to enterprise applications on their mobile platforms, allowing them to bring their own devices into the environment. We actually kicked off a pilot that ran for several months and actually really got to sort of understand some of the issues that come up when you're rolling out your mobile strategy within your enterprise. The thing that we sort of looked at initially was in defining the pilot, which we recommend everybody do, is sort of keep it narrow, keep it pretty defined in terms of who you're going to roll it out to. Look at 2 or 3 different sets of users groups. So you may look at a small user group within sort of your sales organization, which tends to actually travel a lot, and they can sort of be away from the enterprise and give you very good feedback into access of enterprise applications. Another user group might be sort of people that are within a particular office but have very unique sort of requirements. So people within your finance group or accounting group that may have very specific application requirements. So we did select a group of sort of disparate team members within our organization and then rolled out the pilot. A couple of things that, as we went through the pilot, we would want sort of, to look at is really on the initial part, which is the activation, registration, and synchronization, especially when you have employees spread out across different geographies. It's not like they can go to one of the offices and pick up their devices. So you want to have a pretty good defined methodology on how you're actually going to get the devices sort of set up, provisioned, and rolled out to your employees. The way that we actually did it was sort of shipped the devices to everybody and then actually set up using our existing help desk and call center, a process where they'd come in, for 5-10 minutes, get their devices registered, have sort of the MDM agent configured on each of the devices, which then actually allowed us to control those devices. The other sort of key element was, and something that we probably want to define up pretty upfront, is if you're rolling out, for example, Apple devices, then a lot of the work does require an iTunes account, and the question is, do you sort of have sort of blanket iTunes accounts, you utilize the existing iTunes accounts that the customers have, or do you ask them to set up a separate one that is specifically used for corporate applications? So that was something that we thought through, and we allowed actually folks to utilize their existing iTunes accounts. Once the devices were registered, we did sort of set up a backup and restore policy for those devices, and then sometimes there might be lag between when you get the device, you ship it out, and then we spend a fair amount of time to make sure that all the devices were at the appropriate software level. Next sort of thing that we focused on was really on the configuration side, and the key area on the configuration side is actually defining a set of profiles. So you can have different profiles for different types of users. So you could obviously have power users, you can have users that are in your finance and accounting team, users that are in a sales group. You can define different profiles for them and that then sort of decides what type of access and what type of limitations that you are putting around their usage of the device. So we did define 4 or 5 different profiles, and in certain cases you can actually tag in, one user to multiple profiles and set some sort of precedence level on which a profile takes precedence in case there's a conflict. And then based on those profiles that were established, different users groups had different ability to either modify their device or decide which type of applications that they could download as well. And then all of them sort of based on their profiles got different security settings. So some had fairly strict settings in terms of what applications they could get, what type of passwords they could set. Others had slightly different configuration parameters. The next thing was really on the enrollment side, which is automatically making sure that the MDM platform that you have selected actually enrolls the device automatically. And then you're actually seeing the device within the MDM platform. So in our pilot program, we utilized the AirWatch platform, something that Brian had mentioned earlier in his presentation. But we do have familiarity with others as well. So Boxstone is another sort of key one that we worked with. SAP Afara is another one. And again, I think Brian sort of mentioned sort of the pros and cons of each. But at the base level, you can essentially register all your devices to your MDM platform, make sure that they are actually getting registered. And then once you actually do have them registered, one of the things you can do is actually run an immediate compliance report. So you may have, envisioned certain security settings. You want to make sure that they did get implemented on those devices. And one of the quickest ways to actually do that is to make sure that your compliance report is not sort of highlighting any sort of discrepancies in what you wanted implemented on the devices and what actually got on there. The next sort of thing is really on the security side. It's probably one of the key elements that sometimes causes pause as enterprises are looking at mobile enabling their applications or even allowing users to bring in their devices. But again, you have to look at the security from a holistic perspective. You want to make sure that for the applications where you do want sort of containerization, you have that implemented. Other applications sort of can be used as native apps. You want to make sure that any of your sort of access privileges that you've established are fairly well defined. In a lot of our profiles, we actually sort of enforce alphanumeric passwords and not just sort of the 4-digit password that sometimes generically comes with these devices. We also did look at making sure that we did have remote wipe capabilities on all the devices. So in case one of the devices got lost, we did have the ability to completely clean the device. The other things that we looked at from a security perspective were where do we and how do we sort of define kind of the automatic wiping of the device. In certain cases, the MDM platform can actually tell you that a device is sort of out of compliance or based on the information that it's sending back to us, we feel that the device has been compromised, even though nobody has actually sort of reported a lost device or the end user sort of may not actually be aware of that. So setting up a policy that says, under these certain conditions, you can actually automatically wipe out the device is something that we actually did spend some time on. During our pilot phase, we actually never sort of encountered any points where we did kick off an automatic wipe, but there were certainly a few instances where the alerts did show up that said, okay, look, here's one device that you really need to pay attention to. And that's sort of one of the key advantages of having an MDM platform where you can have a fairly proactive look into your device utilization And then you can easily tie that into sort of your traditional network management systems, or even to your network operations centers or your security operations center. So those alerts can flow in seamlessly into your existing processes. The other area, again, from a security perspective, was really to look at kind of encryption as well. So making sure the data that is passing back and forth between your enterprise applications and your devices encrypted, but while it is at rest on your devices, that's also encrypted as well. You can enforce different types of encryptions as well. You can also enforce and make sure that the backups are encrypted as well. Again, a lot of it is defined upfront in the policy areas, and then you can implement them as you sort of roll out these devices to the enterprise. One of the things that I think gets lost in a lot of the buzz around, for example, the Apple devices. Typically when an Apple device is rolled out, there's a lot of talk about how fine and excellent the display is, or what new software has been added to these to the operating system. But one of the key things that's been happening pretty much starting from iOS 4 onwards is sort of the embedded enterprise capabilities that Apple has been instituting into their operating system. While nobody sort of discusses that in the broader public forum, but the ability to sort of control, manage that device pretty much in every release increases substantially and makes it sort of very enterprise friendly. And that's something that's pretty important to keep an eye on as you're getting sort of new levels of security sort of natively built into the operating system. You don't necessarily have to spend sort of money on add-on applications that provide you those additional security parameters. There are a whole slew of sort of things that you can control now on these devices. And it's really important to actually kind of spend some good amount of time in looking at defining those profiles and configurations. And the list of things that I've actually put up here is probably a subset of what really you can control. Whether it is sort of a simple thing like forcing a password to really sort of going to the granular level of whether you allow screen capture, or whether you sort of allow the camera to be utilized, or allow the camera to be utilized in certain instances, but not in other instances. Defining various sort of application access capabilities. Certain applications you just don't want people to utilize. In other cases, you may keep it fairly open as well. So again, fair amount of depth and instrumentation that's available on the devices today that we have access to. And then finally, everything that you can control, you can also query. So your MDM platforms typically can go out to the devices and tell you really what the existing configuration parameters are, what are some of the real-time statistics from those devices. So you can get a pretty good view of how your entire enterprise mobile environment is behaving. And then obviously any sort of exceptions to the policies and rules that you define can quickly bubble up and you can take action. So nothing is ever risk-free, but we're getting to a point where, because of sort of the level of view we have into the devices, we have better ability to understand and manage the risk as we roll out the mobile platform. If you go back and look at some of the things that came out of our experience, was that the utilization of the devices was actually pretty high. I mean, most of our users not only kind of started off using their devices at multiple hours in a day, but one of the things that we also noticed was that over time the usage was actually increasing pretty dramatically. So as they got comfortable with sort of some of the enterprise apps that were enabled on their platform, the usage sort of started dramatically increasing, especially for the sales team. And a lot of time where, when they were waiting for meetings, typically they would sort of not actually be sort of doing work, where now they were actually able to sort of kind of remain a lot more connected, and therefore we actually saw higher level of productivity from the teams as well. The other sort of interesting thing was that you sometimes think that giving employees a platform where potentially is rich in distractions. You have they can download games, they can watch videos, obviously browse the web, but in reality, when we actually looked at the data, very, very little time sort of was spent playing games, and it was sort of so minuscule that we were actually really, really surprised. So the employee behavior did not necessarily, impact, or rather was not sort of unproductive, but actually did impact and improve the productivity of the organization as well. So a fair amount of time was spent, obviously, on basic communication, so keeping up with emails, making sure that you're updating some of the enterprise applications that typically you use in your day-to-day job was really where we found people focusing bulk of their attention on as we went through our pilot phase. What really sort of could be considered a learning, from our process was that from a security policy perspective, I think there's never sort of enough time that you can spend on predefining these things. So we did sort of get into a mode where we were, fine-tuning and enhancing our policies as we went along in the pilot phase. A lot of the things, we felt that we could have pre-configured before rolling out the devices, because we did spend a little bit of time in sort of guiding the users on some basic configuration settings, which we think could have been done prior to actually the rollout of those devices. So that was sort of one of the things that as we've sort of gone into production, we've sort of improved the process as well. And the other thing was really on sort of the base set of applications. It was very important to see if you can define a good, solid portfolio of applications right up front. Allowing people to access Microsoft Office documents. There are probably 4 or 5 different tools out there that allow you to do that. It's probably a good idea to actually test 2 or 3 of those, pick one, and then sort of go with that instead of sort of having multiple tools out there. Similarly, for chatting, if you're enabling that and integrating that with the enterprise, pick one of the chat tools or evaluate a few of the chat tools, make them part of the base application portfolio that gets deployed as well. And then sort of the other is really on the access side. Again, pick 1 or 2 applications that allow you to access the backend enterprise environment. And again, probably the not so ugly part was really to focus on kind of having and building out the specific knowledge base and support procedures for your mobile users. So one of the things that what we don't want to do is introduce a new computing platform, a new communication platform within the enterprise, and then say that we're going to create a separate IT support organization for that, or sort of create a separate set of processes to support that user base. The intent should be to sort of integrate that directly into your existing support procedures, so people should be able to enter tickets into their existing ticketing system and sort of get supported by the same mechanism that you have in place today. And one of the ways to actually make that pretty seamless is to focus on developing a IPAD-specific knowledge base that can be distributed to your support team. They can get trained on that as well. So that was something that we felt could really enhance the ease of introduction of these devices into your mobile environment. So again, from a readiness perspective, focus a lot on exactly what your specific needs are. Are you rolling it out just for a specific set of users? Is it a broad enterprise deployment? look at the best devices that suit your environment, select the MDM platform, and then spend a fair amount of time defining on the policies, and then also do sort of constant surveys and feedback and make incremental improvements. We did probably about 2 or 3 surveys during our pilot phase, and some of the feedback that we got was actually pretty useful. And you're seeing some of those points highlighted here. But one of the feedback that we did get really was around kind of defining the base portfolio of applications, so that everybody doesn't sort of have to keep trying and saying, well, is Quick Office the best Microsoft Viewing application for the iPad, or is there some other one? So those are sort of the steps that we recommend our customers to follow. And we've, because actually we've been gone through it a few times ourselves, and then had the opportunity to work with the large customer base, got a pretty good set of policies and procedures now that that we've sort of packaged together and are delivering to our customers. Just one sort of marketing trick here. As a company, we focus on providing application services. We help customers build native applications, but a fair amount of our focus is really on the ongoing management and rollout of enterprise mobile solutions for our customers. And with that, actually, I'll sort of turn it back to Angela and see if you guys have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Amar. Thank you, Brian. That was an excellent presentation. Lots of great takeaways, and I appreciate your expertise in this area. And we did have a few questions come in, a couple during Brian's segment, so I'll ask those of Brian now. The first question was, what is the mobile it says OS, what is the mobile operating system market share by enterprise deployments versus consumer?
That's a great question. I don't have those numbers directly in front of me. The numbers that I did present, I believe, are by carrier or by subscriber to wireless. I don't know specifically within the corporate environment. I don't have a way to slice that. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's okay. The next question was, most MDM tools have similar capabilities. What would you look for in terms of tool differentiation? And I know you mentioned the tool differentiation, but maybe you could elaborate for a minute there.
Sure. So I think I would start, given that there is definitely some similarities between them and their capabilities. I would probably start slicing out things that I don't like about a particular one. Like if you don't want to have a cloud-only solution, you actually want to own that process. That might help you, steer away from a particular vendor. You may also consider the similarity and the integration points with some of your existing infrastructure pieces. So, as I mentioned earlier, like the SAP one or Symantec, or some of the other providers you already have relationships with. That might be the determining factor. Overall, I don't think I would get too bogged down on whether they support a device that you don't really have any intentions of ever supporting, like some of the older devices or whatnot. And then the sort of locker feature, I think, is very handy in controlling keeping information that's supposed to be locked away. Like one of the features that I read about going through this was being able to turn off copy and paste from the corporate installed apps to the personal apps that are on the device.
That's interesting. Okay, thank you. And then one more question for you, Brian. It says, why will Android support mature in the next 12 months?
So I think the so I mentioned the API differences. So now that Google owns Motorola, they have kind of kept those two separate, but I imagine that Google will start trying to assert their particular, the 3LM based API as the standard for that. And then you know, Android has always been a little behind. You know, it has bigger numbers, but I think that's because of the diversity and availability of multiple devices across a lot of carriers initially. And so I think that as they go through sort of the same maturing process, that the addition of extra features in the space will increase.
Okay, thank you very much. Amber, this one's for you. Jim asked, is this for bring your own device or corporate supplied? And I think he was referring to the iPad pilot that DISYS implemented.
In our case, it was both. So it was a small set of people who were delivered corporate devices, and the others were allowed to bring in their own devices.
Okay, thank you. And then it asks, is there an app as part of the MDM that prohibits users from visiting certain websites like Facebook?
Yeah, so actually you can define within sort of the policies which apps are allowed and which are not. So it can be Facebook, it could be Twitter, you know, it could be any of the games. So you do have the ability to actually control and define that. The challenge sort of becomes is very easy to sort of define that for your enterprise delivered devices, but then sort of asking consumers or asking employees to bring their own device and then sort of removing functionality from that is a little bit tricky.
Right, of course. Okay, thank you. And then this one might be for Brian again.
I wanted to add to that for just
Sure,
a second.
Sorry.
Sorry. So one of the other options too is to potentially route all of the internet traffic back through the VPN, which would allow you to use your existing proxy servers and the rules that you've already defined for your organization as a means of providing some level of granularity there. There are tools and means for routing all of the traffic through the VPN pipe so that it goes through your corporate network. And so then you could deploy whatever other tool sets there that you wanted as well.
Okay, thank you, Brian, for clarifying. And maybe this one is for you, Brian, I'm not sure. Does any MDM tool allow or manage device remote backup?
So I believe the AirWatch platform, I'm guessing that the question is, can you trigger a remote backup to happen or to schedule one? So I know that the AirWatch tool will let you set the policy to do the backups. I'm looking through some notes I have on one of the other tools to see if it allows you to sort of to set the schedule related to that. Let's see. Give me just a second here and let me look through the.
Okay, you take a look. We have one more question, and
okay.
I know we're running a little over, so I want to just get to that. You know, this one says with apps and websites or just apps. I guess he's asking about an answer that Amber gave. With apps and websites or just apps? That could be around the question about allowing access or turning off access to specific sites.
It can be for websites as well as for applications. So just like within your enterprise environment, you know, you may not allow people to log into Facebook, you can do the same thing and not allow them to go through Safari onto certain websites.
Okay, so you can block specific websites and apps.
Correct.
Correct. Okay, thank you for clarifying. We'll go back to you, Brian. Did you have a final thought on that question about the remote backup?
So yes, and well, no. I was looking through the Apple Configurator tool to see if there was that option within that tool. So I think this ultimately sort of ties back to part of the process is that if forcing the backups or setting them on a regular schedule is an important enough feature. It's my belief that the OS will support those things, and so that might be certain criteria for the MDM selection. I apologize that I don't have a more concrete answer, but that's what I have.
Okay. Well, thank you both. I just want to, reiterate our appreciation for the great content that you presented today, and just give the attendees here one more thank you as well for their attention this afternoon. And also, I just want to mention again, we did record today's webinar, so we will be posting that recording, and we will send you a link to that recording for all attendees. And also, if you have other topics you might be interested in, we have presented webinars as part of our monthly webinar series. So these links just give you an indication of the different topics we've been talking about lately. The Agile Product Owner, Program Management for Mergers and Acquisitions was that one in April. Outcome-based testing model, or outcome-based model for testing in QA, Windows 7 migration, and obviously migrating to the cloud. So some of these other topics might be top of mind for those on the call, and we just wanted to let you know those are available as well and out on the Vimeo.com site. So again, thank you to everyone who attended today. Thank you to our presenters. Any parting words, Brian or Amber?
No, thank you everybody for attending.
I was just going to say thanks again for attending, and it was enjoyable to get to present this information.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you guys. Thanks everyone on the call, and we'll see you on our next webinar. Thank you. Bye-bye.